I was saying how you were asking me about Osho and how how you're fond of Osho and how does he fit into the Bhagavad Gita in that context.
Right.
So the Bhagavad Gita actually is one of the oldest texts on spirituality. And I was saying to you that the West doesn't really have, outside of their religions, they don't have much of a spirituality. So let's start off with what's the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is based on faith, belief. Spirituality is based upon experience, direct, experience, realized knowledge, as it's called. It's not just about knowledge, it's about realized knowledge, meaning that you experience the very thing it is that you might set out to. Before you believe it, they say you need to experience it. So it's more methodical, therefore almost more scientific, one would say.
Yeah.
So in the East, you basically have two schools of thought.
Okay.
One of them focuses upon the idea that God is an energy, a light, the universe, whatever term you want to give it. Some call it consciousness. Because, as you probe into the light, you begin to say, well, what is this light? And then others will, is it conscious? Is it not? And you say, well, it is conscious. Is it capable of creation and creating this? Yeah, it is. So basically, it's an impersonal understanding of God as consciousness, light, whatever. And that's what's become really popular in the Western world amongst the New Age, amongst the self-help, self-improvement movements, and so on. It's been popularized by certain authors who have tapped into the Vedanta, which is the ancient teachings of the Vedas, which teach this impersonalist viewpoint, and Buddhism, which derives out of that. Many people don't know this, but Buddhism actually derives from the Vedas. Part of it is a rebellion against them. Part of them is an acceptance of that.
Mm-hmm.
But at its core, Buddhism still follows the idea of an impersonal energy that is the basis of the universe. There is another school of thought, and that school is bhakti. Bhakti means devotion. The idea in that is that God is a being, that this energy that is there comes from the being, God, and that being is someone you can have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
That relationship being a relationship of love, a relationship in which you are supported and loved and cared for.
What did you call that again, Roy? What did you call that again?
Bhakti, bhakti, Bhakti.
Thank you.
Bhakti means devotion or devotional love.
That sounds a little Western.
Yes, actually, much of the religions have borrowed from them. And if you consider the idea that Christ may have actually traveled to India, and that much of his teaching actually is derived from the Bhakti school of devotion, you begin to start to see sense in that.
Mm.
You also see that in Sufism, which is a derivative of which is actually a breakaway group from the traditional Muslim faith. The Sufis, such as Rumi, Hafiz, and many of the others, also talk about a relationship with the divine. They refer to the divine as the beloved. And a lot of folks read the works of Rumi and Hafiz and they think, oh, he's talking about his boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend. But then they hear about his guru and his mentor, and they think, oh, the love affair is with the mentor, because they would always put their mentor in the place of God.
Mm.
And if the mentor was, of course, pure, that means that person would not take that acclaim to themselves. They would offer it back to God.
Mm.
But the mentor or the guru or their teacher was considered the representation of God in this world. So Osho now belongs to that school of thought, which is, let's call them impersonal and personal. Just keep it real simple, right? He belongs to the impersonal school of thought. Now, about 500 years ago, you had different teachers like Chaitanya and some others, Nanak, I think Guru Nanak also of Sikhism, who brought together these two schools of thought and said, hey, guys, there's no need to argue about this, which came first. Was there the light and consciousness, and did that then incarnate as Krishna and Rama and all of these other avatars? Or was there a being God who then spread this light all over the universe and its energy all over the universe? Whichever way you look at it, because both are eternal, they neither have a beginning nor an end. There is no there is no question of time here, and therefore there is nothing to debate.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, doesn't
Thereby
seem
resting
like
a
there's much.
long-standing debate. Right, exactly. Now, Osho, who you brought up, talks about Krishna in perhaps the highest light you could ever speak of. He says there has never been a being like Krishna. There has never been anyone who embodied both light and dark, who could accept war when there was war required, and who was a lover and accepted that. A person who embraced all aspects of life, from fun and pleasure to seriousness and being a ruler. Every aspect of life is embodied within Krishna. So he has a lovely book called Krishna, the Man and His Philosophy. He thinks of Krishna as perhaps the most advanced man that ever lived.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, for Osho, just as a little side note, he referred to himself as Bhagavan. Bhagavan means the supreme being, God. And strangely enough, he wouldn't accept anyone else as the supreme being, not any of the avatars in the Vedas, nothing except he referred to that name for himself. Later on, he went from Bhagavan Rajneesh to Osho. He took out that part. But that's a strange dichotomy. But
Did you
um,
see? Did you see the? I know you got to get on with everything. Did you see the documentary on Netflix about Osho?
oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The Wild Wild Country, was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely worth watching.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see what happened to the establishment that he created and how they went kind of berserk.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
he's fun. I don't take everything 100% from him, but he's fun to read.
he's fun to read. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadhguru is another person who's also very interesting in the way he speaks. He's on video on YouTube a lot now.
Who was that?
Sadhguru, Sadguru. It
Oh.
could be Sadh.
It's
Uh,
H. Yeah.
yeah, H, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sadhguru. Otherwise, it'd be Sad Guru, right? He'd be, yeah. And while he makes a lot of sense, again, he belongs to more of that impersonal understanding of God. Though, unlike the Vedantists of his ire, he's a great follower of Shiva. And Shiva is an interesting being. Shiva is there are a few little parts of the Vedas that talk of Shiva as the supreme being, but the bulk of the Vedas, 95%, I'd say, refer to Krishna and Vishnu. Krishna and Vishnu is really the same thing as the supreme being. So there are some followers like Sadhguru who think of Shiva as the supreme being, and really there's no issue because Shiva is they do not, there's no quarrel between these two, there is no feud, there is no separate, there is no sense of no. Shiva is actually a worshipper of Vishnu, um, and then the beauty of the relationship they have is that Vishnu will exalt Shiva as well. So I think what is important is to read books like the Bhagavad Gita. And my critique on Sadhguru would be he isn't actually familiar with the Vedas, and he says it repeatedly himself. He has neither read the Bhagavad Gita nor any of the others. He is a person who is enlightened by pure accident, not by some long process of um, that he went through. And I wouldn't even call it accident, it's the wrong word. He has had some mystical experiences that have completely lifted him into a different realm altogether. He's an incredibly wonderful being. I don't mean to diminish any of his greatness there, but I would say at the same time, his knowledge of these things is very limited, and he admits that. I'm not making that up, as his own assertion. Which is interesting that we're talking about this today, because that's exactly the verse we're on. Chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 34. For those of you that have it, I think all of you have it now, so I don't think I need to put it in the chat, but if you do, let me know.
Can
Any
you put it
questions
in the
before we
chat?
get started? What's that?
Can you put it in the chat?
Of course, sure.
Thank you.
Now, if you're on a phone or an iPad, you won't be able to.
Okay, I'll get my laptop.
Get your
Wait, but
laptop
I'm
in
gonna.
that case. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I'll put it in the chat for you.
cool. Thanks.
Any questions before we get started?
Yeah, I'll ask a question, Rohit. Since
Hey, Craig.
hey, um, curious about. I'm not terribly familiar with Sadhguru other than stuff like YouTube and whatnot.
Right.
But I do. I think I have heard a few things and kind of what you mentioned with him being a follower of Shiva and whatnot. But he also teaches like techniques, right? Is
Yes.
that something that he grabbed from a specific lineage, or is that something that he
I
like
think
also brought
subsequent,
down?
yeah, I really don't know. Did he just download that information? Because he does teach very specific techniques. Did he learn it from some guru? He talks about a guru from his past life. And I don't, maybe Krishna knows better. You seem to be following Sadhguru, Krishna?
No, no, not at all.
Okay. You just like the guy.
No,
So,
but my friends keep on talking about him a lot. So does my
right,
cousins,
right.
and I'm like, yeah, okay. Like I'm aware about him, but I don't know anything.
What I personally believe in is this: bringing together all these different schools of thought, not an either or. Krishna, that's yours. I think
Yeah,
your
yeah. Sorry,
voice
I
is up.
just
Yeah.
muted. Sorry. Yeah.
Bringing together all these schools of thought, both Vedanta and Bhakti, Buddhism and Christianity, bringing it all together because we can learn from all of them. I find that the moment we start, one of the problems with religion and many teachers, I think, as well, is they get into this idea of this is better than this. You can have a personal preference. I have a personal preference for Bhakti, but I find that many of the teachings in Buddhism, many of the teachings in Vedanta help me in my bhakti. So I don't see a need to uh, cut off anything. It's all valid and it's all useful. What are your thoughts?
I think wisdom is wisdom.
That's right.
Wisdom transcends, culture.
That's right.
And my thoughts is like like I gravitate to just the fascination of what's out there, but I think at this point, I have my guru. I've gone down that road, and I've just come to the point where I'm like full speed ahead down one specific road, and I'm kind of like at the same time I may start rubbernecking and be like, oh, that's all cool, but I don't like let it. I don't start heading that way and let it take all my like I have enough to focus on with where I'm going, and that just seems to be where the potency is.
Fantastic. Yeah. So that's a really important piece Craig is talking about. There are so many different things out there that you cannot really be focused on so many. You need to take one path and actually do something, right? So if you are more inclined to an impersonal understanding of the divine, of God, go for it. If you are inclined for a more personal connection, a relationship, a sense of a loving presence of God in your life, explore that. Find what's in your heart. Don't go by just what's the popular thing going around, but actually see what feels more in integrity with you. To me, I was never drawn to just a pure impersonal understanding. I wanted. I had heard of stories of Krishna when I was a kid, and always been drawn to that. Um, if you haven't come across those, yeah, check them out. There's the Krishna book spelled Krsna. You'll find it on Amazon. There's the stories of Krishna, and yeah, read a little something about his life. That's more of his child. Well, no, the first volume covers his childhood. Second is sort of the in between. The third one is his adult years.
I think it's interesting that like you have Judaism and Islam
Mhm.
where God is not allowed to be spoken of really. You can say
Yeah,
you can say God, but you're not allowed to have an idol. You kind of
Mhm.
can't have
Mhm.
where Christianity reverted back to having a personal relationship, like you said. It seems similar.
Yeah, but they at the same time they did not want any idolatry. They did not want any sense, of that. And then they still did the same thing. They made their saints into idols. They made Jesus on the cross into an idol. You know.
Well, that's what I mean. It seems that Christianity has kind of followed more of this, like what you say, this personal
Yes,
relationship,
yes. No,
and Judaism more of the
it-
impersonal.
but also Islam follows the idea of a personal God, and Judaism also has that. The only difference here, and I'll tell you the key difference. The key difference is where you put God on a pedestal and say God is great. So if you look at the main line, the Muslims will say Allahu Akbar, which means God is great.
Mm-hmm.
In Judaism, also the same idea of God being this exalted being, and we are nothing, and so we bow down. There's a relationship. The relationship that is there is of master and servant,
Yeah.
or yeah, and the result of which is you hold God in awe and reverence.
Mm-hmm.
um, when what bhakti presents is the idea of intimacy with God.
Mm-hmm.
And intimacy, as you know, is about, no, take out the reverence, take out the position of higher and lower. You're on the same level now,
That's fascinating.
right? And you're relating at the same level.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Where they will talk of surrendering to God, here God surrenders to you. Here formality is thrown out the door.
Mm.
And what matters is the love in your heart.
Wow.
So where, for example, let me give you a very concrete example. There's an example of Ram. Ram is worshipped as a king and is one of the avatars of Vishnu. And he is, people put him on a pedestal and so on. But Ram himself is very simple. There's a time when he's in the forest in exile. Long story, I'm not going to get into it. But in exile, there's an old lady called Shabri, and Shabri wants to offer him fruit. Now, for the traditionalist, when someone offers something to God, you don't even taste it. You cook a dish, you offer it, but you do not even taste it unless it has first been offered. That's the kind of rules and rituals people follow. But Shabri, when Ram's in the forest, wanted to feed him some berries, but she didn't want the berries to be really sour. So she takes bites from the berries, makes sure they're okay, and then feeds them to Ram. Do you get how contrary that is to anything you would come across?
Oh
Krishna's
yeah.
Krishna's friends and buddies would climb on his shoulders. They would steal his lunch. They would play games.
Oh, it's something I can't even relate to because I've been so indoctrinated into like what you said, having this reverence
Yeah.
God that absolutely.
The gopis with Krishna, they would kiss, they would hug, they would make
Wow.
love. I mean, you
Yeah.
tell someone, in the Bible it says to think of God as your husband, but hey, most people wouldn't dare thinking that far. And
I,
even
I,
traditionalists in India have a hard time accepting that Krishna had a girlfriend, Radha.
I think for a Western mind, it would be almost impossible to break into that.
That's right. And,
Almost. You know what
and
I
I
mean?
believe that that is the reason why the Western mind has a very hard time accepting these ideas. It's
Oh yeah.
much more comfortable for the Western mind to accept an impersonal understanding of God for two reasons. The first of which is called religious wounding. And religious wounding is what has come through from the religion, right? The fear, the guilt, the shame, and all of that, the idea of a judgmental God and a God who's going to punish you and send you to hell,
Right.
has produced so much of psychological wounding in people that they do not want to accept the idea that God can be a being. An energy, very comfortable, no
Mhm.
problem,
Yeah,
right?
much easier transition for sure.
Much easier, exactly. But I often say to people, you cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because someone polluted the bathwater doesn't mean you need to throw the whole idea. You need to actually come back and re-examine the idea and say, hey, what if it was something entirely different than we've been taught? And here is a possibility. What Krishna is presenting in this here is a possibility that is completely contrary to what the religions of the world have been teaching. That's why Osho says there has never been a being like Krishna.
Mm.
He said, one who comes singing and dancing and celebrating life. You will not come across that anywhere. You do not think of God as celebrating life. You do not think of God as a lover. And yet they talk of God as loving everyone. Well, how does God love everyone? Does he love you just by blessing you like that? Or does God come and hug you? Does God come and kiss you? Does God make love to you? How far would love be, what would be considered appropriate for God?
Yeah.
You see, this is sacrilegious. This is scandalous almost.
Sure. Oh yeah, sure.
And even people in India who've grown up with these ideas have a hard time really understanding. They don't take the time to grow, to really dive deep and understand what this is all about. But if you open your mind up and you say, if the highest frequency of the universe is love, and if there was an embodiment of that consciousness, a being that was an embodiment of that consciousness, and that being was to express that highest frequency of love, how would it be expressed? What would it look like? The stories of Krishna give you one possibility. And I tell you this, it is not limited to that.
You would probably have to go through some sort of atheism before you even got to that. From a Western mind, you would have to like break away from that through like
Yeah.
some type of environmentalist or atheism to be even, because that idea of this vengeful God is so ingrained. It's so implanted in so many things.
And consider what it has done to us. It has made us being judgmental of ourselves and
Yeah.
each other normal, right? If you look at the average person, when I talk to them about practicing non-judgment, it's extremely difficult. I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you just on that topic, what really helped me in that is something that's, I mean, I read the statement from the Bible, judge not lest you be judged, and took that to heart. But what a little twist happened within that. Because see, that statement only says about not judging other people. But I had a Me Too reaction, which is like, hey, if I'm not going to judge others, I don't want me to be judged either. Right? I always hated being judged and criticized. So I said, I'm also not going to judge myself. And thank goodness I did that, because I would have failed miserably had this little bit of intuition not come in, this little bit of child part of me not come in that wanted to be included in this noble idea. And because I included me in it, I think it worked, because I think that the way you treat yourself is the way you treat others.
Yeah.
And if you're kind with yourself and loving with yourself and non-judgmental with yourself, if you practice that, then you're more likely to succeed doing that with others. Because
Sure.
when your archetype is a God who judges people, then you will follow your archetype. Carl Jung talked about that. He talked about how the archetype actually influences who you are.
It's unconscious, part of your unconscious too. I
Part of
also
your unconscious. Yeah, exactly. And so that then shapes the nature of our society. Think about what our society is. We've got judges, right, who go on judging whether people can live in this world or whether they get locked away and put in jail. The world being your freedom being heaven, the jails being hell, right? Once you're thrown into jail, they try to keep you there as long as possible, so you get damned for eternity if they can help it, right? There is no question of redemption, because they don't, I mean, for the most part, if you are a sinner, then you're damned, right? So they don't bother to even reform people or help people get better. They just lock them up. And along with that comes all the other archetypes we've created based on that hierarchical model of God. We have CEOs in companies, we have presidents of countries. Why? Why do we have these people? We don't need them.
Oh my God. This was the exact thing I was thinking last month. Like, why do we have, aren't we like powerful enough to like just
Yeah. Why do we need these people who get paid 100 times, 1,000 times more than the average worker in the company? I'm not
One
saying
of
we
the
should
things
necessarily
that
follow a capitalistic model, a communistic model either, but why this one?
yeah, it's like when I look at the idea of how society runs itself,
Yeah,
just as you were painting the picture of how people accept God in one certain way, and really it's
yeah,
just like you're looking for this loving relationship, like total openness.
yeah,
So kind of expand into this openness. I think the one thing that really got me very comfortable with just going that route is just the idea of the yugas, just the cyclic nature and understanding that calendar as if we're surrounded in a society right now that's doing some really weird things. It's because according to that calendar, things are a little bit low consciousness right now. And where this Bhagavad Gita comes from, where these teachings comes from, is just going into the sattvic area. So
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
like that's the North Star. Everyone can do what they're doing, but understand this 24,000 years is like, whoa, that's where I want to be, even though we're way off. It's like I could still live there.
So, Craig, you can live there now. Let me give the background to the other folks who may not know about it. The Vedas talk about four yugas or four ages, four periods of time. The first of which is considered the golden age. Just to put, I won't use the Sanskrit words here because you'll have a tough time with that. But Satya Yuga, the age of truth, the golden age. Treta Yuga, think of that as um, bronze. The, no, so gold, silver, I think it's, yeah, like that. So silver, that would be Treta Yuga, then Dwapar Yuga, which is like bronze, and then Kali Yuga, which is like iron. So um, the first is an age of peace and harmony that exists in this planet, in this world. Then you come to an age where things start to deteriorate and then deteriorate further. The time where Krishna is there, it's the end of the third age, Dwapar Yuga, and we're entering into Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is the most degraded, conflict-ridden um, time when everything just sort of degenerates. We think we've advanced. According to the Vedic system, we've actually regressed. We've gone downward. In where? Not in our external world, in our internal world. They look at the internal world, the consciousness. The consciousness of people has degraded. What do you mean by degraded? We're no longer, I mean, very few people are actually conscious even of their thoughts, conscious that they have the ability to be responsible for their, for their thoughts, for their reactions, and so on and so forth. They're very, very, very unconscious. Unconscious of the energy that around them, unconscious of who they are as a being. So many ways. So this is the Kali Yuga, the age we live in, the Iron Age, the age of the degradation of humanity. And then at the end of that cycle begins another golden age. And interestingly, the Bible talks about the same idea too.
Yeah, I think it's
Wonder,
just looking at that diagram in itself. Like even if you go Google image, like Vedic calendar or yugas, it's like you see that calendar
so there is
comparing.
a diagram like that?
Yeah, yeah. You go to Google Images, type that in. It's just like our brain is wrapped around this Christian calendar, and then you
Mm,
see the world that opens up with just a one diagram, and that
mm,
cyclical nature of it is really just in
yeah.
itself. That's like a meditation, just looking at that. That's
Yugas, Yugas.
like,
Yuga. Yuga means age. Yugas. So that's what Craig. I haven't looked at this diagram, but hey, um, if you pull it up, we'll put it on the screen.
help for me. I'll see if I can find it.
um, so the important part here to know is books like when Krishna is speaking the Bhagavad Gita, he's speaking it for this Kali Yuga. He's speaking it for this time where he knows that this knowledge is going to be lost and it has to be somehow preserved. So that's why the entire Vedas were written down at that same time. Any questions before I get into the Bhagavad Gita itself? Chapter 4, text 34. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Now, there's a number of things in here that I'm going to point out, but I'm going to read the next verse as well, just so you have a clear idea. Because remember, the Vedic system is not based on faith, it is based on symptoms. It is based on symptoms. So here it is. Having, the next verse, having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities, or all karma. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service, bhakti, enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Okay, let's go up to the top. Try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. These two things are pointed out, submission and service. Submission does not mean that you cannot argue or question or discuss. It's not about submitting, not in the Western sense of the word. It means a sense of humility. It means a desire to learn. So if you come with an attitude of wanting to learn, with humility in your heart, I remember watching someone talking to Muji uh, in a group satsang that they were having, and this woman is like, "But I've come from LA, and I have come here, and I have all this following of people on YouTube, and you're telling me that you're not going to answer my question?" And he says, "No, I prefer not to engage. Thank you." Because she was being defiant and she was being very arrogant. He says, "How can you do that? All these people are watching." "I prefer not to engage," he replies. It was very interesting to see the way of handling someone who is coming with a very arrogant attitude. So here he's referring to a submissive attitude, which means a desire to learn, a humility to learn, a place of saying, "I don't know." If you see how Arjun begins the Bhagavad Gita, he says, "I am bewildered about my duty and do not know what to do. Please guide me." So that's the mood in which one inquires. And be willing to render service unto him. Now, this is not just about pressing the person's feet or some such service. It's being able to help support, whatever way you can, what that person is doing, help them in their work, so render service in some way. But the most important part comes in the next sentence. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So it doesn't talk to you about a believer. It doesn't talk to you about faith. It talks to you about a self-realized soul, one who has realized their true self, experienced it. They have seen the truth. So they don't just know the truth, and they're not talking about seeing the truth with your eyes, but seeing it as in experienced it.
They've experienced it.
Pardon?
They've experienced it.
Experienced it,
Yeah.
exactly. And one who has experienced the truth can tell you about it.
Yeah.
Right? You can see pictures of a foreign land, but when you hear from someone who's been there and who's lived there, then they can tell you in intimate detail what it's like to be there and how to get there. So we're talking about the most foreign land of all, the one that is within us. We've been searching everywhere in the world, but we haven't gone to this ultimate frontier. So if you want a guide to get to that ultimate frontier, that's why if your guru is dead and gone, it's not much use. You're not going to be able to get much learning because you're not going to be able to ask that person intimate details about the journey. You'll have what they've left behind in books. But you see, that's theory. Now, when you start to walk the journey, there are many things that are going to come up for you. And a living teacher who has been on the other side can actually point out to you what the hurdles are, what the blocks are going to be that are specific to you and can help you clear them. Sometimes you'll find these gurus can be pretty hard. They're not very flattering. In fact, quite the opposite. You'll hear from some of them how they went to see their guru and they were told to get out. They were told, you don't understand, you'll never understand, go away from here. And then they had to fight their own ego to stay on and continue to learn. Having obtained real knowledge from a realized soul, you will never fall into such illusion. So it doesn't mean that every follower or disciple will experience these symptoms, but one who has taken it seriously, one who has really dived into it, will experience this symptom, that they will never fall into such illusion. For by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are part of the Supreme. Why does he say all beings are part of the Supreme and our mind? Consider this. He's giving as one of the symptoms of being. So you will never fall into this illusion again, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are part of the Supreme, that they are mine. I've got this question for all of you. Who would like to take a guess as to why he's referring to all beings are part of me, part of God?
Because we all have at least one essence that's a part of God. That's what I
We
feel.
have one.
We all are a sense of him, like him,
Right.
her, it, whatever. But
Yeah.
we all are from that particular consciousness, whatever you
Right.
call it.
So the difference between a realized person and an unrealized person is this, that you realize that that which is within me, which I'm experiencing, this peace, this joy, this beautiful spark of life that is within me, is within everyone. And now you start to treat everyone with the same reverence that you treat yourself and the way you treat your God. If you do not see God in everyone, then you have not realized yet. Therefore, if you look at the commandments, just let me finish this one moment. If you see the commandments, the 10 commandments, Christ pointed out they were the first two were the most important. The first one says to love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And the second says to love your neighbor as yourself. Two pieces to that. The first part is as yourself. In other words, the assumption is you're going to love yourself first. And then as you love yourself, you're going to love your neighbor. In fact, these three form a triangle which no one talks about in Christianity. That you cannot love God without loving your neighbor, and you cannot love your neighbor without loving yourself. And that the true symptom of someone who loves God is that they will love all other beings, not just people, all creatures, and see in them the presence of God. And that's your symptom, because you can, anybody can pretend to be a great lover of God because they wear some clothes or they wear something on their forehead, have some robes or some beads. That's easy to do, to mimic. But see how they treat people, and see how they treat the people who are below them, especially their followers, their disciples. If you look at how they treat people, let's say, who are serving them, especially those. Then how do they treat animals? What do they do with the animals? How do they treat them? And then you'll know whether they've understood anything or not. Yes.
There is a funny story. I love dogs, all right. But whenever I've got into a toxic relationship, I started hating dogs. Like I started being scared of it. Like this is the pattern I've always faced. And it's quite weird, but yeah.
But I think that toxicity separates you from your true reality. In your heart-filled space, you see the oneness of all beings. When you get into a toxic place, you're very much in your head and you lose track of that. Could that be what's going on?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Who else was going to say something? Was it you, Ryan?
I think Ariel was going to say something, but I was
Ariel?
thinking that it's like the God is already within you, and it just needs to be. It's not something that you really have to find. It's more like finding it within yourself. Is that what kind of a little bit what you're?
So there are actually three things in this: God as a being or an energy, God within you, and God and within all creatures, and then God everywhere. All these three are aspects of God.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So to take only one piece of that is only to see the limited portion. In other words, if I just see God as some being out there, but I do not see the God in every creature, then I'm only seeing a very limited part of what is God. And if
Yeah.
I do not then see God in every atom of the creation, I'm missing out on the beauty of God. Now this includes the things that you like and the things that you don't like, the ugly and the beautiful. It's not just about the beautiful. No one said that God was only good. That's just a man-made concept. God is the ugliness, God is the darkness, God is the light, and God is neither. God is neither good nor bad. God is all of it and yet none of it.
That's deep.
Yeah. Ariel,
And I
were you
was going to
going to say
say
something?
on the disciple part, I was just reading recently about, and it's something that affected me a lot. And I'm 50 years old, and I actually almost changed me a little bit. Changed me a lot. Something that made me realize that I was never a good disciple.
Mm,
And Osho had a story about being the disciple. I always wanted to be the master. I always thought I knew everything.
right.
I always wanted to, talk about how much I knew and how good I am and everything like that, and what jobs and everything like that. I was never a good disciple. And there
Mm,
was a story that I read that said, you know what? And since then I've been approaching people and different things as a more of a disciple. And I've seen the effect
mm,
that it's had with other people, and it's quite nice. It's
mm,
quite I feel more relaxed when I approach people and jobs or business, and even
mm,
in business and everything
mm.
in that way. And you learn more, and you have to be a good disciple to become a master. You can't just become a
Absolutely.
master. You got to be
Absolutely.
that good
You
disciple.
have to be the student to be the teacher. You
Yeah,
cannot really teach if you are not. If you do not continue to learn, no matter how advanced you get, if you do not continue to learn, and you cannot learn if you think you know. Anyone who thinks they know has plateaued,
yeah,
right? To know is to plateau,
yeah,
but to
no
stay
doubt.
with the unknown, right? That's
Osho
when
has a few stories where this professor will come see him, and he pours like a glass of water, and he's like, "I can't teach you because that glass is already full."
yeah,
Kind of
exactly.
thing.
Ariel, were you wanting to share something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is really clicking with me. It makes sense that for us to be self-realized, I mean, if we only see our connection to God, then we are still placing like this tone of self-importance and
Mhm.
like a lot of ego. Like, oh, well, I'm so connected to God, but this person and this person, like, no, they're not. And this just really makes sense to me. That's all I was going to say. Thank you for making it click. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, if you do not see that presence, and you know what? Not just seeing the presence of God there, but seeing that even most, the person who's done the most horrific deeds is a spark of God right there. They're in this role right now. They're in this body and they're in this particular role of a serial killer or a rapist or whatever else they might be. Um, but that spark of God is still in them. Because if it wasn't there, they wouldn't even be alive. And the soul has no mind. It has no connection with this whole reality. It's like the electricity. The electricity doesn't really care what you put it through. You could put it through a toaster, you could put it through an oven, you could put it through a light bulb or computer. So it's the same soul, but it could be in an animal body, it could be in a human body, it could be in the body of a murderer, it could be in the body of a saint. It's like the electricity. Wherever you put it in, that part, that thing's going to come alive. So he's playing the role, right?
How do we let go of judgment though of people like murderers? Like I know that's kind of a big question, but like to be self-realized, we'd have to. How do we do that?
See, to let go of judgment, first thing I found is stop judging yourself. Judgment is not the same as discernment. Discernment is very important. Judgment, discerning something is, okay, so this is a mouse, this is a phone. This is discernment. This is what this is. This is a pair of glasses. That's discernment. I know what this is. Judgment is, that's a terrible phone you got there. Oh my God, who would buy such a thing? Ugh. Apple, jeez, hate it. That's judgment.
You should really have considered getting into the acting field.
Acting.
And there's the preference thing too. It's just like, ooh, I really want chocolate ice cream right now. And I go to the store and they don't have chocolate ice cream. Like, you don't have a hissy fit. You're just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm not attached to the chocolate ice cream. I'll take vanilla.
Yeah, if you were truly in a place that is fluid and accepting of whatever life shows you, you'd go, instead of chocolate, you'd go for vanilla. You say, all right, fine. If that's what there is, let's enjoy the vanilla in that case. Maybe another day we'll have chocolate. But
Yeah,
if
but we're
you're,
talking about murder here. So like how like this is a little more extreme. Like how can you just be like, well, someone just murdered someone.
so
That
Shakespeare had a
happened.
really great way of putting it because Shakespeare dealt with a lot of murder in his plays.
Okay.
So he had a great way of putting it. He said, there's this specific one that I studied when I was in high school, so I happen to remember it. And he says, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely actors. They have their entrances and their exits. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. Not a lot I remember, but that's it.
Yeah, that was like, that's a lot.
So the point being, what if his point is correct? That this is the role that that person is playing. And
No.
you may or may not like the role, but if it was a movie you were watching, you might say, man, that was a great acting job Anthony Hopkins did there. What an incredible, acting as what was the guy who was a cannibal? Hannibal Lecter, right? In
Hannibal.
Silence of the
Mm-hmm.
Lambs, right?
Anthony
And we say,
Hopkins.
Yeah.
what a great role he did. But he was a
Oh
cannibal,
yeah.
right? Right? He was eating human beings. And yet we say, what a great role he played. So I'm not saying you got to hang out with that person.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you need to approve of them. You need to know this is what this person does. I don't need to be around them. That's okay. But I don't need to judge them either. That's not my position.
Does
I
the
need to treat
Bhagavad
them.
Gita ever say anything about like killing or anything being like wrong? Does that ever come up?
You know what it does very interestingly. So, for example, when it comes to the area of the portion where it talks about diet, it never talks about it as wrong. It talks about the effects of food on consciousness. And it says that
Mhm.
if you want to develop a spiritual life, then do not eat meat. Very clear.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
meat produces a certain energy, and that is an energy of aggression. And that is very good for warriors. If you are a warrior whose job is to go out and kill others, meat is very helpful in producing aggression. And in today's time, we understand why. It's because all that adrenaline that is secreted in the animal while it's being butchered is in its body. And when you eat that adrenaline, it gets you all pumped up. And so, a person who has been eating meat like that, their consciousness is very hard for them to quiet their mind. Very hard. It's as it is very hard. Let's start there. But he says these certain foods will inhibit your ability to reach that spiritual consciousness. I have been vegetarian now for over 40 years, and I can tell you it's a big part of what has helped me to be more kind, to be more compassionate, to be more loving, and to have a quieter mind. That's my experience. I've also stayed a lot healthier as a result. So again, there is no condemnation for anyone. If you choose to do something else, do it. But also try something else. Don't just go by belief. Don't just believe you're a scientist. Don't just believe some books you read. Experiment. Is Krishna making sense when he says that there is an effect of food on consciousness? Explore the idea, try it for yourself, come up with your own conclusions. That's the approach the Bhagavad Gita takes. Similarly, it talks about spicy foods, and it talks about, foods that are old and stale, and people who eat stuff like that, they're in the mode of ignorance. People who are always eating, you know, how do you say, processed foods and foods that are, um, you have your leftovers for days and weeks, and then you go out and you eat it. He says, no, have your food fresh, have your food raw, have it, as close to nature as possible.
What about spicy food? What does he say?
That's in the mode of passion. So people
Oh,
like that will tend to be very passionate.
okay.
And it's agni, it's fire. Like too much spicy food. So just if you're already got fire, it's gonna like make you angry. It's
You
skin's
find
gonna break
yourself
out.
getting very angry if you find yourself very uncontrolled in your rage or your reactions to things. Try cutting down on the spices and see what happens.
No,
This
no
really
hot
makes
food in
sense.
June in the middle of summer. No.
So here's the point that you'll notice this demonstrates the point about not judging someone. I remember the time when I first became vegetarian and getting up on my cousin's dinner table, not getting up on the table, I stood up with all her guests around who had been called for dinner. And I was so damn judgmental. Stood up and I said, you people are all murderers and you're all killing animals. You're, a bunch of, I just went off on them. Like, oh my God, I was 20 years old. You know how it is with smokers when they first they stop smoking, they become like real fanatics, or people who join some religion and they become fanatics. I was like that. Embarrassing stories.
Rohit, I may shoot myself in the foot with this, but I can't remember if it was you that was also mentioning the story. There was like a great sage who began like on the other side of the tracks and was actually a murderer.
Yes,
And
Valmiki, the one
okay,
who wrote
yes,
the
yes.
Ramayana.
So it's a wonderful lesson in just karma and how people could just swing to the other side. And
That's right. By
what,
the association of saintly people, by chanting the name of Ram, he became purified and was able to not only stop all the acts of murder and theft that he was engaged in, but became a very highly evolved spiritual being.
and what's his name again?
Valmiki, Valmiki, Val, Miki, Miki.
Thank you.
We pronounce it as Valmiki, the author of the Ramayana, the story of Rama.
And is Ram the same as Rama?
Yes, unless someone's trying to talk of something else, but Ram and Sita. And usually in Sanskrit, the last letter A, in North India, they don't pronounce it, and in South India, they do pronounce it. So it's confusing as hell.
Okay.
Where I come from, we don't pronounce the A, so Ram is not pronounced as Rama, it's just Ram. However,
Okay.
Krishna is an A at the end. And it's the only one of the few times where it is spoken of at the end. Because it's ah and not a. There's two sounds, a and ah. So Ram is the smaller A. And the bigger A sound is at the end of Krishna. Complicated. I'll let you know as we go along.
Thanks for that.
Okay. With that, we come to the end of Bhagavad Gita for today. And I would love to actually just go on and on. But we're going to continue with loving soulfully and talking about relationships. We are going to hang up over here and start up on the same link, same place, in just about a couple of minutes, or rather a few seconds. I'll be right back. So for all of you that were here, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan.
And for being so completely devoted to be here on Tuesdays and taking your time out. Really deeply honor all of you. Thank you for being here. Oh, and one more thing. I am starting a new course. So if you want to learn about how to really help evolve yourself spiritually, I'm giving you an entire mentoring program starting from May 5th. If you want to look up the details, innerevolutiongroup.com. innerevolutiongroup.com. Go there, check it out. If it is something you would like to learn, you're going to get into some real specific tools and techniques that will help you with all of the different things listed there. It's a systematic process for inner evolution. So check it out. It is a paid program, but I've kept it as reasonable as possible. And it's a mentoring program that will last 6 months. All right, see you guys next week. Take care. And if you're interested, join me back again using the same link. We'll continue talking. Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Ryan.
everyone. Good night.
Night.